No.
Yeah, maybe make sure.
Oh.
Look at that handsome guy. That's great. All right, Marshall, do you want to screen share?
We're getting it there. Sorry, it's just taking a moment to close out of it.
Talks you the largest one.
How's the girls?
Very good.
You know, I took them home the last day and I said, when are we going to see you? When are we going to see you?
Are we, Randy and Stephanie, are we good?
Yes, we have audio and video.
Do we want to wait till 6 o'clock officially?
Yeah, we've got 1 second for us to pull it up, so there you go. We'll wait till 6. And then one more person that was here with me in person got stuck in an accident, so they're on their way. They're just a few minutes behind.
He wasn't in an accident.
No, he wasn't in the accident. Wow.
I was gonna say that was very casually mentioning that.
As soon as he gets their stuff.
But he is dedicated.
It is, it'll be right. I mean, he is a transportation planner, so.
You can call a taxi.
So we go.
Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes,
Great.
I think we're good to go. You officially call us to order, or do we just
Do we
start?
normally call time?
No.
No.
I'll just do a quick welcome, everybody, Planning Commission and Council for this joint meeting. We have Chris Shires with Confluence, and he has a team that's zoomed into the conversation. I'll kind of turn over to them to kind of go over what they've got so far with the comp plans. So.
All right, Sid, thank you. Mayor, council, commission members, thank you for giving us some time to meet with you tonight. And Marshall, if you go to the next slide, we're really excited as your consultant team to meet with you still early on in the comprehensive planning process to kind of give you an overview of what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish. We're going to roll through a bunch of data. So we'll first do team introductions, talk about what is a comprehensive plan, how do we use it, why is it important to us, talk about how we're doing this, what's that project scope and schedule look like. Jan will be running through the community profile, this analysis that we've completed, and just a few of you in the room have actually seen this already, so you can lay your head down and just rest a little bit. But it's really some good information, so I think you'll like seeing it. Jay and Jared are going to talk a little bit about transportation analysis. So I got this flip chart here. I'm going to ask you a few questions at the end, just to kind of get some thoughts from the leaders in the room, what's important to you as issues and opportunities for Paola, and then what our next steps are from here. So next slide. Again, I'm Chris Shire, so I'm the lead on this, your project manager. I'm a planner with over 25 years of city and county planning experience. I love doing this, and I love working with communities all over the Midwest to help plan for the future. And so this is a lot of fun for me to be here. I'm out of our Des Moines office, so I'm with Confluence out of our Des Moines office. Jane Reesner is on the phone, also works out of our Des Moines office with us. And then Marshall Allen is from our Kansas City office. And then our partners, and also we have Abby. Apologize for forgetting about Abby. She's a new planner that I've brought into the Des Moines office, helping us with public engagement, other planning work. And then Jay and Jared, and Jay's online with us right now with WSP. There are planning, transportation planning, and engineering consultants with us as our team lead on this project. Jay, in fact, will probably be doing a lot of the talking on the transportation analysis. And Jared's the one running late, not in an accident, just running late due to a little bit of congestion, as you guys sometimes experience around that show, right? So next slide. So again, just a little bit about Confluence. We're Midwest-based and Denver. This is what we do, audit designers, landscape architects. The next slide. And then WSP, big firm with a strong local presence. So we really get a lot of local attention from them. These guys are out of their Kansas City office. All right, so comprehensive plan, what is it? Why is it important? What do we use it for? So just that definition. So it's this long-range plan, this vision for the future of the community. And we use it to help us make decisions on where to spend money, where to annex territory, where to approve new development, where to invest our efforts and energies to really help set a vision for our future and try to set goals and action items to make it happen. Next slide. So we focus on, it's typically future oriented. We do look at the past to help us gauge that future, but it's a future focused plan. It also helps us figure out that, again, that public investment. We want to encourage that strong and diverse economic base. It's an information management tool. We're going to have a lot of data in it. And what's good is over time to use that as kind of a checkpoint to see our trends and things that are occurring. We analyze those existing conditions, but this will evolve as your community evolves. Frankly, as our country changes or as our economy changes. So we've seen a lot of rapid change, as we all know, this last year. We established goals, but this is a plan that guides and recommends. It's not code. It's not your zoning code. It's not your official policy document. It may influence. We're going to have some policy recommendations, some goal recommendations, and we hope that every time there's a big decision or something important you're doing, rezoning, annexation, a budget question, or your capital improvement programming, that you're referencing back to your comprehensive plan. We're also wanting to make sure it's focused on engaging the public. This needs to be the public's document. You guys are the gatekeepers to it. It goes to the commission and ultimately then rests with the authority of the council. And we're trying to also identify and reinforce your community identity. Okay, so lofty, a lot of stuff in it. And then one of the most important things, legally, we need it to have your zoning code justified. So the comprehensive plan sets the basis for your zoning code and frankly your zoning map. And so for the commissioners in the room, this is extra important. And as we develop the plan and talk about it, we'll talk about even the use and the application of it. But this is really to help you focus. Zoning, we all know why zoning is important. We're not trying to tell people what to do. We're trying to make our community healthier, more long-term sustainable, make sure we have the adequate public infrastructure necessary that we can all have quality lives, quality jobs. Okay. So in our comprehensive plan, there's a lot in it, and we customize them for every community we work in, what's important to you. There's a lot of maps, existing inventory analysis maps, and then this future land use map from which we help make decisions about the future, what our zoning looks like. We do a lot of inventory and analysis. And then the really big thing, the goals, policies, and action items of how we implement this plan. Some of the big things on how we implement it. So we can do it through regulation, and that's typically the zoning and subdivision regulations. We do it through capital projects, and that's where you're taking your capital dollars, doing a new street project, repair project, sewer extension, things like that, or park improvement, or other programs that we might partner with, say the county, the school district, even private partnerships. An effective implementation is the difference between, between having a good plan on paper and having a great community on the ground. So we really want to make sure that this is a living, breathing, usable document that just doesn't sit on a shelf. We really want this to be something you own, you use, that you go to as a reference. Okay, now switch, thank you. So quickly here on the project scope and schedule. We started back in March and wanting to wrap up here at the end of, or the beginning of next year in January. It's just a simple 4-step process, and we're already through phase 1, which is that kickoff analysis research. and we're having our analysis kind of re-review workshop with you, where we're telling you what we've seen. And then we're already started into phase 2, which is that public engagement and public input with stakeholder meetings, a public workshop that we're looking to do Tuesday, June 29th, some special event booths, and then we'll come back and visit our advisory committee that you guys know of to present to them what we heard. But we'd like to meet with the commission and council early on to get your feedback and also let you know the process we're going through. We'd love you to be an advocate to the community to say, participate in our public process. In phase 3, we're drafting the plan and rolling it back out to the public and the community. In fact, our next time we'd ask for a joint workshop would be then, where we can present it to you as a group, the draft plan. Very much in draft form so that people don't think we can't make changes. It's important that we can make changes. And then in step 4, phase 4, that's where we're finalizing the plan, rolling it back out through the official approval process, commission to council. Okay, just that simple. Any questions before we jump on? All right. And, oh yeah, here's a little bit more in detail, but we'll kind of skip through. So phase 1, go on to the next one. Phase 2, I'll talk about this a little bit. Sorry, Marshall. Go back one. So we're going to show you later on here in this presentation online engagement website. We've already started stakeholder interviews that our steering committee helped us identify some folks to meet with. That now public workshop, we're looking at actually June 29th. Some special event booths. We already been working on this kind of sub-process on the Wallace Park master plan and had a good meeting with the council. And then we review this with the advisory committee when we're all said and done. And then in phase 3, go ahead. That's where we're drafting, rolling it back out to everybody, having our public workshop or our joint workshop review. Phase 4 of the adoption process. All right, I jumped ahead. And then we did brand this process. Everything needs kind of a logo and a brand. So we wanted to build upon your existing brand and plan, your colors and all that. And so really, we're calling this new comprehensive plan planning Paola. Okay. Now with that, unless there's any questions, I'm going to hand it off to Jane, who's going to run through our community profile analysis.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Sorry, everyone, again, for the screen share issues at the beginning. Like Chris said, some of you have seen this in the room before, so this will be an overview for some of you, a slightly condensed one. And I'm going to go through things pretty quickly just because we want to hear from you all in the meeting too, and we have a lot to cover. So we'll send this presentation to you later. The full meeting from last time's on the project website that you guys are going to gain access to this evening, so you can have some additional time. First and foremost, we do a lot of mapping, like Chris said. This is kind of our base map for the community, and most of the data that we pull just for the community as much as we can. Some of it we have to do from a Miami County-wide perspective. We do a look outside the city limits for certain data, obviously, but by and large, this is kind of the reference point for most of the data you'll see tonight. So Marshall, if you go to the next slide. First and foremost, we take a look at population. So 2019 estimates were around 5,600. We'll be getting some additional updated estimates, I think in September of this year. So we will update this accordingly once the census kind of gets its act together and gives us all of this data that we need. Since 1990, we've seen about 19% growth, gain of just under 1,000 residents. Over time, we've seen that, there's been some ebbs and flows of population, but generally speaking, it has continued to grow as a community. In that last kind of 10-year time period, we've seen, about 100 or so kind of net growth according to the ACS estimates. So one of the things we do for this comprehensive plan is we look at population projections, and there's a lot of different methodologies for completing population projections, and we run a bunch of different ones to kind of look at different trends. But by and large, population projections are founded on the idea that kind of what's happened in the past will continue to happen in the future. And there's different, like I said, different methodologies. We'll come up with a bunch of different scenarios, some of them really high growth, which I don't think it's that high end one I think is really unlikely. But I similarly think that low end one is equally unlikely in many ways. So we do run that average, which for all the different scenarios that we did was around maybe 8,500 around that 2050 mark. And so That being said, if, while we do anticipate growth, we think there are some other factors affecting Paola and its position within the metro area that might kind of maybe push that number up a little bit depending on growth trends in the greater area. So if you go to the next slide, this should be no surprise to you, but one of those reasons that we think there could be additional growth and maybe what the past population change suggests is because of your really convenient location within the Kansas City metro area. So the map on the right is a drive time analysis map. You kind of see those that distance of 10, 25, 50 miles, and then that drive time map from kind of the main intersection on Baptiste and Paola. So the darker the color, the shorter the drive time. We see that, by and large, most of the Kansas City metro area is within that kind of a 1 hour drive time. Now, WSP is going to look at this a little bit more in terms of kind of traffic conditions and how that might affect this commute. But we think that, as more people are working from home or even just willing to drive a little bit longer to get more of that small town feel, that this is a real reasonable kind of attainable place for people to live and work within, particularly Southern Johnson County. Another thing we look at is the age breakdown of the community. So the chart on the left is the age breakdown in Paola between males and females, and then a comparison to Miami County as a whole. And now because your community is on the smaller side, there is a lot of kind of sampling error in some of these more detailed census breakdowns. This is annual averages through, or 5-year, but through the ACS. And so that's what's accounting for kind of those really strange looking fluctuations. So take this with a grain of salt. It's not, an exact count of every member of your community. But by and large, we do see a higher representation of some of those younger age cohorts within Paola compared to Miami County. The other thing we want to do is take a look at how age cohorts are changing over time. And we're really interested to see what this analysis looks like with the 2020 data, because that will kind of tell us more recently how things might be changing. But, who was alive in one age cohort 10 years ago is going to be 10 years older in the future. So by comparing kind of that net change between the cohorts, we can kind of estimate which ones are receiving in or out migration within the community. Now in Paola, you're always going to see gains in those 0 through 9. They weren't alive in the previous census, but we do see some, modest gains in other school-age children of between 55 to 13, depending on. Then we do see an exodus of people in their 20s, which doesn't surprise us. People go off to college, maybe leave town, then they'll maybe come back again later in their 30s. And that's kind of what the data is telling us. Anecdotally, we've heard that there is actually some decrease in children kind of K through 12 enrollment at least. And so that will be interesting. That's another reason we want to see that 2020 data to kind of get a better look at what's going on right now. But that's kind of what the data is telling us currently. So the other thing we take a look at is the breakdown of households. So around 65% of households they estimate in Paola are owner occupied. So typically we associate that with single family detached homes, though not always. It can be townhomes and other things, condos. And then about 35% renter occupied. And we did provide a comparison chart on the left about how that compares to the United States, the KC Metro as a whole, and then Johnson and Miami County. And so it's about right on par with the US average, but it is higher for renter occupied percentages than Miami County especially, but also Johnson County. Similarly, we like to take a look at those households by income. So the chart on the right in purple shows the household income brackets for Paola. Now the median household income in Paola is around $51,000, but we see a lot of the kind of incomes clustering in that 50 to 75, that 75 to 100. And then additionally, we see this peak in that 25 to 35,000. And actually quite a few people actually fall below that kind of 25,000 threshold in terms of a percentage of households. So, the chart on the left shows that comparison again to the US, the metro, and then the 2 counties. And there's no getting around it. Paola does have a lower median household income than those comparisons. So that is something that we need to take into consideration in terms of housing in particular. This is another chart that we like to do, and this kind of helps visualize those differences in the percentage of households by income groups. So the ones on the left are those lower income brackets, and you see those very lower ones. Paola, which is in that thicker kind of reddish line, is kind of right on average, but once you get into those still low, but like not less than 10,000, you see Paola really start to jump in terms of its representation compared to the other groups. And similarly, as we get into those very higher income groups of 150,000 or more, we see quite a significant decrease in terms of Paola's representation of those brackets as well, just to kind of help visualize why that happens in those medians. We also took a really deep dive into housing within Paola because we know this is really important in this plan. So there's two different data sources that we use. We use census data, and then we also dive into the Miami County parcel data. So some of those numbers that you see are going to be slightly different in terms of those totals. That's just kind of rounding error and estimate error. But for right now, we're looking at census data, the estimated breakdown. You can see the kind of homes less than 50,000, they don't show up as that much in Paola, so less than about 1.5%. We see a lot of homes falling into that 50 to 100, 100 to $150,000 range in Paola, and then we see another spike in that 200 to 300,000, which is actually really similar to that income chart that we saw earlier in terms of where those breakdowns kind of go. And then we also take a look at the year structure built. Again, this is census data estimates. And we see, over 20% of homes were built before 1940. And then another roughly 17% were built, or similarly kind of older homes built in that 1940 to 1949. We do see kind of a slight uptick in houses built between 2000 and 2009, but not a whole lot has been built in the kind of years since then. Now, in terms of housing costs, we look at it from both renters and homeowners. So the chart on the left is gross rent. So this is looking at renters. Median rent in Paola is estimated to be around $728. And, almost 3/4 of people are paying in that kind of range of between $500 and $999. We see some paying slightly more in that kind of $1,000 to $1,500 range. There wasn't any estimate people paying more than that within Paola. And then the chart on the right shows a monthly housing cost, and this is for owner-occupied units with a mortgage. So we specifically looked at this households with mortgages, and we see that over half are in that $1,000 to $1,500 range. So typically people are paying more for their mortgages within Paola than they are renting, with a median monthly housing cost of $1,300. However, straight up what they pay per month isn't necessarily indicative of what that burden is, depending on their household income. So the Department of Housing and Urban Development typically says that if you spend 30% or more of your household income on housing, you are considered cost burdened in terms of housing. And so we took a look at what percentage of one's monthly household income is going towards housing costs for renters, according to census estimates. And you see there's really a diversity in that chart on the left in terms of what percentage people are paying. However, about 40% are considered cost burden within renters in Paola. And likewise, we did that for owner-occupied homes with a mortgage, and only 22.8% of those, even though they're paying substantially more, were considered cost burden. So we see this quite often, but it's something to keep in mind in terms of the cost burden nature of renters in Paola. So then we dive into the parcel data. So we did kind of a parcel by parcel analysis, and the map on the right kind of shows its breakdown by density. So low density, we were really strict in saying just single family detached homes or manufactured homes that are kind of standalone. And of those, there's around close to 1,800 parcels that met those criteria. For medium density residential, we were really liberal in our definition of what that was, just to kind of show that variation. So we consider duplexes, attached dwellings like any townhomes or things like that. Some group homes were put into this category. And even that said, there was a really low representation in terms of total land, in terms of medium density residential. That's not a huge component of the housing stock within Paola. And then there was about 22 parcels with high density residential. So think anywhere where there's, apartment style living. We've included some of the senior housing within this category as well. Go to the next slide. So we took a deeper dive into the single family residential because there's a lot of really good data available around it, and it is in the majority of the housing stock in the community. So one of the things we did was take a look at that year built by kind of geographic distribution. And the map on the right, the lighter colors show the older homes. So that lightest kind of almost off-white is about 1900 or earlier, 1901 to 1940. And then those darker blues are ones that were built since 2001, being that darkest blue. And kind of matching what the census told us. There's quite a substantial number of homes that were built before 1940 in Paola. But what's really significant is that they're so clustered in one area. That's not surprising, but we can definitely see where the growth is occurring. And the reason that this is maybe troublesome is it's kind of one of those things that we look for creating us versus them within a community when we have such stratified kind of year built, and you'll see this trickles into other factors as well. So Marshall, if you go to the next slide. We also look at the total value of the parcels where those single family homes were located. So this is taking into consideration the value of the building and the value of the land. And so, about 65 were valued less than 50,000, and then another 20% were in that $50,000 to $100,000 range. And we'll see a lot of this map really follows that year built map, where that kind of center part of the community near the downtown has some of those lowest valuation homes. And then the last component that we looked at or mapped, we looked at other things as well, was kind of the style of the home. And we look at this because some of those older style homes, like the old style home or even ranches, and some older style ranches, they might have some amenities that are outdated and maybe not attractive to people looking for homes today. Smaller kitchens, one bathroom, no garages or one car garages. And so we look at these as being susceptible to kind of neighborhood rehabilitation efforts as well. So you can see that the orange is kind of clustered in the downtown and the central part of the community. That's the old style homes. And some of those newer development, we see a lot of conventional. And then ranch style homes include ranch, raised ranch, and ranchette. Then we see a mixture of some other ones in the older parts of the community as well. So we took all of that data and we looked at homes that were built before 1940 and created a point for them, homes that were old style, and then homes that were valued $50,000 or less. And then we did a heat map analysis to kind of indicate where might be those trouble areas for housing within the community, those areas that are vulnerable to kind of degradation of neighborhoods and housing quality, and maybe should be focused for neighborhood rehabilitation efforts and some special care and attention. And this probably isn't a surprise given the maps and just your familiarity with the community, but these areas in red were kind of those hot spots where there was a lot of clustering of those three different factors present. So that's something that we're going to take into consideration. We also take a look at some of the available real estate data that they have for Paola. We do some comparisons, but we can see over time, this is going from March 2012 to March 2021, that the number of active listings in Paola has kind of steadily been decreasing over time. And we've seen this in a lot of places, but overall, there's kind of less inventory of housing. We heard that again today from someone familiar with the housing market. If you go to the next slide. We also take a look at what homes are selling for. And because it's going to be a smaller sample size, you don't have as many homes selling. There is quite a lot of variation. So you kind of see that up and down. But on the whole, we've seen the median sale price for homes in Paola steadily rise. So you see back in 2012, it was on that 100 to 150. In April of 2021, the median sale price was 270,000. So while that inventory is going down, supply and demand, the cost is going up. Now, we did want to show you some comparisons because there are some national trends at work, and Paola is really following suit. So we're looking at the nation in red, Johnson County in blue, KC in kind of taupe, and then Miami County in pink. And we'll see that there's these trends nationwide of sale prices per square foot going up, and Paola is right on trend. It doesn't have the same scale, so it's only $120 per square foot in April compared to the US 201 per square foot. But we're seeing Paola is not an exception to national trends. And amidst all of this, homes are selling quickly. So we heard that again today just from stakeholder interviews, but the time spent on the market is dramatically decreasing. And if you go to the next slide, Marshall, you'll see some comparisons strictly for Miami County and Paola. And in April, the median days on the market was 3. And back in March of 2013, it was 160. So there's quite a lot of variation, but definitely a downward trend. There's not that many homes, they're selling for more, and they're gone quick. All right, then I'm going to go quickly through some jobs and economy data. So we wanted to take a look at how there isn't necessarily data specifically for Miami County or for Paola, but we wanted to look at Miami County and try to get a sense of how the rebound from kind of the COVID pandemic has been doing. And this is kind of total job numbers for the county over January 2019 to March 2021. And we can see a strong dip, obviously, in April 2020 when we were kind of in the midst of everything. Things were shutting down. We got to a real low point. But at last kind of number when this data was pulled, we were back nearly to the level that we were in July 2019. So there's a lot of things we still don't know about how this recovery is going to affect the economy long term, but at least from a total jobs perspective in Miami County, there seems to have been a kind of a rebound effect already taking place. So that said, we took a look at the latest available data from kind of the US Census on the map about the employment profile of the community. So the red lines on the bar chart represent jobs that are physically located within Paola, and this is by industry. So you can see healthcare, educational services, retail, trade are on top for jobs within the community. And then the blue represents where people who live in Paola work. So there's going to be some people who live and work in Paola. But there's clearly some similarities in where they are, but it's not a perfectly even match. So healthcare is the biggest industry for people who live in Paola, but then we see retail trade taking the #2 spot, and then educational services. So slightly different percentages, but really dominated by those three sectors. The other thing we wanted to take a look at is, if that's the jobs, who's coming in, who are working those jobs, who's going out. So in 2018, and this is obviously pre-pandemic, things have changed, but they estimated that nearly 2,900 people were traveling into Paola for work. So inflow workers, people who commuted into the community. We sometimes look at these as potential residents. So they already spend a lot of time here, but they're just choosing for whatever reason to not live within the community today. They estimated around 660 both work and live in Paola, and then close to 2,200 live in Paola but go somewhere else to work each day, or whatever the hours they work. Then we wanted to take a look at what distances are people traveling and where are they, where do the workers that live in Paola live? So of the people who come into Paola each day, around 40% drive less than 10 or travel less than 10 miles. I'm assuming most of them drive too, but travel less than 10 miles for work, then another 30% in that 10 to 24. And then when we look at where they're coming from, where their home is, about close to 80% are within just the KC metro area, which Paola is considered. About half live just within Miami County, about 18% in Paola. Johnson County is another big one, 12.8%. And then you can kind of see how the top breakdown by both place, metro area, and county, with Overland Park getting about 2.7%. And then we also wanted to look at the people who live here but work elsewhere, where are they traveling to work on a given day? And the numbers aren't too dissimilar in terms of distances. So about 30% go less than 10 miles, another 30% go 10 to 24, and 25 to 50. So there are people clearly making that trip to the Kansas City metro area. 82% roughly do in the kind of greater area, another 40% nearly within just Johnson County. But 23% live in Paola or work in Paola. But then we see some people go as far as Topeka or Lenexa, Shawnee County, Kansas. So some people are making some, pretty significant trips for work. And then I'm going to hand it over to Marshall now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jane.
Before you start, Marshall, does anybody have a question?
Oh yeah, please.
There's a lot she went through. We are going to give you this presentation. We will send it out to you, and it'll be on our website as well. Okay. Stunned silence.
You nailed it, Jane. You covered everything. Okay, I'm going to go over the physical profile. So just what it sounds like, what you see, what are the physical current conditions of the community of Paola. So first off, we'll start talking about the floodplain. Probably no surprise to you, Paola is pretty much surrounded by floodplain, associated with all the major creeks that go through the area, including Bull Creek, Walnut Creek. And this presents, challenges, certainly. So certainly any flooding that typically occurs with creeks tends to be more rapid and shorter in inundation time. So that has hindrances in terms of development, and certainly we'll take this in consideration as we move into the recommendations of the future land use plan moving forward. We looked at the stream classifications, so there's perennial and intermittent streams, and again, Bull Creek, Walnut Creek, South Wea Creek, Dorsey Branch, and then Lake Myola itself. So again, it's important to understand the different classifications for those streams. This will help us determine, again, those future land use recommendations and other recommendations in terms of stream corridor protections, floodplain protections, that sort of thing. Looking at the slopes and topography of the area. So this is obviously something important to take into consideration. Topography plays a key role in development opportunities. It can both be, an asset and a hindrance, both of those things. Obviously, it adds to the natural character of the community. It can also serve as, good transitions between different land uses, provides that nice buffer between different land uses, but also, it can increase the costs of development. And erosion can also be a major concern associated with steep slopes specifically. So you see here steep slopes highlighted in the browner colors and the low slopes in the floodplains, for example, representing those. The green color representing those low slopes. So you see a good mix of topography in and around Paola. Looking at the parks in Paola today, you are well served with the 6 parks that we are identifying here on the map to the right. And if we look at the level of service, provided to these parks per 1,000 residents, we typically would recommend 10.5 acres per 1,000 residents, and you're sitting at 11.4 acres per 1,000 residents. So you're really well positioned and you're well served by the parks in your community. And additionally, the trails that are highlighted on this map, you're also well served by the trails. It's a nice system that covers the majority of the community. So this is important to consider, moving forward as well, as the community has the potential for growth in the future. We'll definitely want to maintain these level of service numbers. So that would look at incorporating additional park space in potential future growth areas. And then associated with those parks, we look at the walk time analysis for these. So you see here in the darker colors, those represent the 5-minute walk time from a park. And as you move out, the lightest color is a 15-minute walk time. So the majority of the residential areas in Paola, are within that 15-minute walk range. And so we'll also, like I just mentioned, we'll be indicating parks in future growth areas and want to maintain that walkable aspect to any kind of future growth in terms of parks and recreation and open spaces. For the existing land use in the community, Jane kind of mentioned some of these earlier on, but you see here kind of the dispersion of the different land uses in the community today, the low density residential, those single family homes, the medium density residential, those would be duplexes, townhomes, row homes, higher density residential, that's where you get those stacked units, apartment buildings, and then office, light industrial, commercial, city public, that would be anything that the government owns, the city of Paola, the school district, that sort of thing. And then parks and recreation, those are those programmed spaces, and then open space and undeveloped is pretty much what it sounds like. And then so this is, a key to look at the percentages of what's happening in the community today in terms of existing land use. So not surprisingly, low density residential represents the largest classification and breakdown of land use in your community, and that's typical for most communities. That is the highest land use present. Where Paola does punch above its weight a little bit is in the open space and parks and recreation. That's considerable amount of land fall into that land use category. And again, that goes into the level of service numbers that I just went through. So that's not a bad thing. Having those high percentages of park space and open space is a really great thing for the community. We also took into consideration the large water area. Lake Myola represents a large footprint within the community. Industrial and commercial land uses, these are important to take into consideration because those land uses really help to pay for all the things that the city needs to pay for, in the taxes that those different types of land uses pay out. It's important to keep those numbers, as high as possible and to keep them growing in the future, because those are really important revenue generators for the community. And then, I'll mention high density and medium density residential. Not a lot of that in the community today. So that's something we'll be looking at in the future, as Paola starts to grow towards those population projection numbers that Jane mentioned earlier, making sure that there is the housing available to attract a diverse amount of residents, both current and future residents. And then finally, we'll look at the planning boundaries that we've established. And this is something that was discussed with the steering committee in our last meeting with them. So this is, a standard practice in terms of comprehensive planning. It's important to look outside of the city limits itself, because what happens outside of the city limits is obviously going to impact what happens inside the city limits. So this is not at all, an annexation map or anything like that. But again, it's important to take into consideration that adjacent context. We try to be strategic in terms of how we draw these planning boundaries. You could just do a radial, buffer around the community, but we try to pick, natural buffers, important corridors to incorporate into these planning boundaries. And so you see here a couple of different options. Option one is looking at those areas really west and north of the current city limits along that Highway 69 corridor. And it includes that 169 and 68 highway interchange. So this is the natural, growth area coming down from southern Johnson County. So this seems to be a logical first option for a planning boundary. If we look at option two, that looks more south, incorporates the Miami County Airport, captures more area along 169. And, as we look at the context around that airport itself, that could maybe lend itself to a future business park type model in the future. And so that's something to consider and discuss if that's something that the community would want sometime in the future. And then option three looks more westward, crossing Bull Creek, crossing those rail line corridors, and maybe there's some future residential development opportunities looking more westward.
And before you go on, Marshall, if you go back to the map, any initial thoughts or feedback, and so those would be cumulative, like maybe it's just 1 or 1 and 2 or 1 and 3 or 1, 2 and 3 or some combination of the above. Are we, as your consultant team, on track? Does this seem insane or about right? Any thoughts? It's okay if this is too new, you don't have any thoughts yet.
Where's old Casey Road? Is it there,
Yeah.
Let's get it out, right?
right there?
Yeah. And part of this is also thinking, if I can point it out right, trying to get back, logically to the gravity feed. That's for your sewer system, thinking we don't want to try to pump too much. So that's number 3. Maybe it's worth jumping west. There's some barriers there, but then at least that can be a gravity system back to your treatment plant. Okay, so the last time you guys get to talk about it, though, go ahead.
Does the blue there represent the floodplain, or is that just wetland?
Floodplain, the 100-year floodplain boundary. Any other questions for what Marshall just went through? Go ahead, please.
I have a question about if 68 highway gets expanded, what impact would that have on land usage?
Great question. So 68, which if I can reach right up there, no matter what, that's not getting smaller, and it's probably going to not carry less traffic. It'll be an important road corridor today and going into the future, no matter what it might even look like in the future. So I think we're going to plan land uses accordingly, and maybe that's an area for business growth and development. So yeah, in fact, that's something we need to think even from the regional standpoint. Some things even came to light in one of our stakeholder interviews today that I need to reach back out with Jared here and ask him a few questions. So, yeah.
Well, and I know 169, I'm here long enough, I can remember when it was only 2 lanes, and automatically things gravitate toward it when it became 4.
Yep.
So I think I mentioned in the advisory committee meeting that I feel like corridor one's already growing. We're already going after it way naturally. I would like to see more of number 2 also, because I feel like it will bring people through town as they're going north.
Yeah.
I feel like if we grow north, we're going to anyway, and people just keep heading north, it seems like. So I like the idea of looking at number 2 also.
Okay. Other comments or questions on this section? All right. Well, fair enough. We'll talk even, we'll go on to the next thing on transportation. I think Jay's going to cover that.
Yes, thanks, Chris. So I'm just going to run through some of these transportation features, the physical features, just like Jane and Marshall did for the other aspects. And what we have here just shows the city of Paola, the street grid network, where you have streets. On the left shows the speed limits. For the most part, all low speed streets, 20 miles per hour, typically 30 to 35 on your major streets. And then of course, 169, Old Casey Road, some of the county roads outside of town have those higher 55 plus mile per hour speed limits. And on the right shows traffic volumes. Again, the green is low traffic volume, residential streets. You can see 169 has over, I think about 12,000 vehicles per day traveling on it. So definitely with the 4-lane highway configuration can carry a lot of traffic. Baptiste, Old Casey Road coming through town, Silver Street have a little bit more than other streets, but not a huge amount, about 3,000 to 5,000 to maybe 6,000 vehicles per day driving on those streets. Something we always look at from a transportation perspective is bridges, because bridges are expensive, difficult to maintain. And a good thing is looking at the national bridge inventory. The bridges around Paola are, for the most part, all in very good condition. One bridge in fair condition, but that's a KDOT jurisdiction bridge on 169. So good bridge condition in the city. Another major aspect is the railroad. I'm sure all of you are intimately familiar with the railroad and the horns you hear coming through town. The good thing about the railroad in Paola is that on the north, south, and east side of town, you're not restricted by it because there are grade separated crossings of the railroad. But on the west edge of town, you do have a pretty major set of track crossings on Peoria. We have the BNSF and the Union Pacific lines both converging at the rail yard over there. And there are a few other minor crossings throughout the city as well, but not high traffic crossings like the one on Peoria. Looking at the way people are traveling, we have some information on the commuter mode. This mirrors what Jane had spoken about from a demographic perspective, but for the most part, people are driving in Paola, about 95% commuting by car, 3% walking, and then a few others on bus, bicycle. But primarily people are commuting to work by car. Now keep in mind, this is for commuting. This isn't for general transportation. I'm sure there's a lot more people walking or biking around town for recreation or to go downtown or to visit the parks. That's separate from actually getting to work and back. In terms of commute times, similar to what Jane had mentioned, looking at those commute times, about a third of people in Paola, their commute time is less than 10 minutes. So that would be mostly people living and working in Paola or directly in the surroundings. You see another jump at about 30 minutes of commute time, and then another jump at about 45 to 60 minutes of commute time. And those roughly correspond. You go to the next slide. In drive time on the left, it's a little bit hard to see, but Paola's in the middle there, and you can just see Johnson County, Overland Park in the top, and to the left side is Ottawa. And that 30-minute drive time gets you all the way along I-35 from Ottawa through Edgerton, Gardner, and then to downtown Olathe. So makes sense. We have a big jump at about 30-minute commute. And then if you look at the 60-minute commute, that gets you all the way down to downtown Kansas City, all of Johnson County, and Lawrence. So there's quite a few people commuting to Northeast Johnson County, commuting to the I-35 corridor, but then also a sizable amount of the population that's commuting to living and working within Paola or Miami County. This shows again where those people are commuting Johnson County, a few in Jackson County and Missouri, Wyandotte County. That's about the just distribution of where people are commuting to from Paola. On the topic of commuting, the world's obviously changed with the COVID pandemic. Things are going back to normal in a lot of ways. These charts actually show mobility trends. They're collected by Google through your smartphone usage. And these charts show the relative mobility compared to pre-pandemic levels for different destinations. The top left shows retail and recreation. You can see right when the pandemic hit about mid-March, early April, there's a huge dip in activity of people traveling to retail stores and for recreation, like gyms, and that slowly rebounds, and by now that's pretty much back to normal. The top right is grocery and pharmacy. That didn't have as much of a hit throughout the pandemic because people still had to get groceries, still had to go to the pharmacy, and whether or not you were going in person, there was maybe somebody doing grocery delivery for you. The bottom left shows parks. There was a huge jump in usage of parks throughout the pandemic, but that's also seasonally affected. What's really important here, I think, is the bottom right is workplaces. And you'll see at the very beginning of the pandemic, around April, there was a huge drop off, about 50% drop in people traveling to work from their house. But what's really interesting is that as you go to today, which on the very far right is essentially today and last week or so, that has not rebounded much at all. It's still sitting about 25% less than what it was pre-pandemic levels. And a lot of businesses have reopened, a lot of professional offices have reopened. There are still some that haven't reopened, but the trend going forward, the expectation is that commuter trends are changed dramatically, at least for the near term, if not for the very long term, in that people will be doing a lot more remote work. There'll be a lot less commuting, a lot less traffic on the highways during those peak periods. And a lot more people not commuting long distances. Now, those were nationwide trends. We also have it for Miami County itself, and it's about the same, a little bit less, but it looks like about 18% less travel to work for Miami County residents than pre-pandemic levels. So this is going to be an important consideration when we think about housing and population changes, and like Jane said, some of those different factors in the world that we have today that might change some of those trends. Looking at some of the other modes of transportation, biking, we just show a 15-minute bike time map. You can pretty much bike to downtown Paola from anywhere within the city in about 15 minutes. And if you're up for a long ride, a 60-minute bike ride will get you all the way to Hillsdale Lake and south to Osawatomie. So you can get pretty far on a bike in the area. Walking, you see on the left, that's pretty much the core of Paola, the street grid bounded by the rivers there. You can get to downtown Paola from any of those spots in about 15 minutes, a very reasonable walking time. And if, again, you're up for a long walk, you can get all the way out to the lake and surrounding areas, and almost down to the airport, actually, if you walk for an hour. I don't know how many people are walking down to the airport, but pretty reasonable, compact city that you can walk a lot of places within the city. Marshall mentioned earlier the trail system. We do have some great trails in town, the Mile Lake Trails, Wallace Park Trails, along Hedge Road. And there's some other regional plan trails from the Metro Green Plan from the Mid-America Regional Council that ring around the city and primarily in the river floodways. We also have a sidewalk inventory. Now this is just the location of sidewalk, not the quality of sidewalk. So this shows generally where sidewalks exist, but not necessarily where they're ADA accessible. And we do have a pretty good coverage of sidewalks in the city, in the downtown, and in the old historic area, but less sidewalks as you get further out. And especially to note when you get close to Wallace Park and when you get close to Mile Lake, some of those sidewalk networks really kind of drop off in their regular existence along the roadways. So we don't have a great look at exactly where people are walking and biking. We don't really have counts like we do traffic counts, but we can use some different data points. This data comes from the Strava fitness app, which is focused on cycling and running. And it aggregates where the users are going and creates these maps that anyone can access online. And so this shows a really good representation of where people are walking, running, or biking for recreation. Most people who are biking downtown or walking downtown or taking a stroll aren't necessarily on their Strava app, but people who are out for a long ride who want to record the ride or their jog usually are. So, but it does give us a good idea where people are comfortable riding, where they like riding. And you can see definitely the Mile Lake Trails, Mile Lake Drive, Silver Street, Old Casey Road, Baptiste are all very popular places to be cycling. This similarly shows walking or jogging within the city and more usage down in Wallace Park, around downtown, around the square, but still definitely very popular at Mile Lake. From a regional perspective, we want to look at this for cycling because cycling is becoming a pretty important regional draw, economic draw, and tourism draw. The city of Ottawa is a great example. They have the Flint Hills Nature Trail and the Prairie Spirit Rail Trail intersecting in the city. The Flint Hills Nature Trail comes to Osawatomie and stops there. And there's quite a bit of cycling coming from other areas, a lot of events. And so we want to look at how this might affect Paola. And what you'll notice is right around Paola, there's kind of a drop off in cycling compared to areas around. It's a little too far from Johnson County to get a lot of those recreational cyclists, and it's a little too far from the Flint Hills Nature Trail to really attract those cyclists. And there's really not any great regional cycling facilities in the area connecting to Paola directly. Most of the county roads have no shoulders and no way for cyclists to comfortably ride those long distance trails. I'm going to let Jared talk through some of the transit items now.
Sorry I was late. I'm Jared Branson. I'm a planner at WSP. And so, yeah, we took a look at public transit in the county and in the city. And so there is some service, but it's a little thin. Right now, the main focus of transit is the Lake Mary Center. These trips are all on demand. You've got to schedule 24 hours in advance, at least. And then it's only available on weekdays. So there's no Saturday, Sunday service. And service ends at 4:30 in the afternoon. So, you know, it's work trips, medical trips, things like that. If you're going out grocery shopping, anything you might do in the evening makes it tough to get around sometimes. There's also cab service to get around the city. That's Monday through Saturday. Goes a little bit later into the evening. And then there is a rideshare program for the Mid-America Regional Council. So if you're taking longer trips back and forth to downtown Kansas City, there's that option for you. Also area agency on aging for senior focused trips. So ridership on the Lake Mary system took a big drop from 2014 to 2015. And I'm sure there's a good story here that I have yet to uncover. So I've got a little data to do about what happened at that point. And you can also see the amount of service followed suit. The annual revenue miles dropped from about 90,000 miles in a year down to about 40,000 miles a year, just continued to trend down. And then you can see what ridership did in comparison, also follows that budgeting trend too. So budget shifted, service was reduced, and then ridership went along with it. And I think Jay's gonna jump back in, right, for talking about safety in the city.
Yeah, so traffic safety is something we always look at when we do comprehensive planning because it's such an important factor. Looking at Paola, in the past 10 years, 2 people have been killed and 105 have been injured in Paola. And this is just within the city limits of Paola. This doesn't count people, residents from Paola driving in the county or commuting to work. And I can imagine every person in this room knows someone who's been injured or killed. Maybe even some of these people that have been killed in the city may have been neighbors or friends of yours. So it is a very important thing that we always look at. The trend is slightly upward in Paola over the past 10 years. There has been an increase in these fatal and injury crashes. And when you look at the places where these are happening most, it's Silver Street, North Pearl, or Old Casey Road, Baptiste, Osage, and Hospital are the highest crash streets in the city. We can actually monetize these crashes and bring them into an economic perspective based on money lost by residents, businesses, families, lost productivity, property damage, medical, all kinds of issues that are associated with crashes. And when we do that for the city of Paola, and again, these are just the crashes within Paola, this doesn't include residents who may have been injured or killed outside of the city limits, that adds up to about $54 million in a 10-year period, which is a pretty severe economic disbenefit from these crashes. And when we monetize these things, we can also get a good apples to apples comparison of different types of crashes. And so you can see the top most impactful crash types are those fixed objects, the roadside, those run off the road crashes where somebody drives off the road, hits a fixed object like a telephone pole, a building, a ditch, a culvert side. And the second one is bicycle and pedestrian by a long measure, which is surprising. Usually bicycle and pedestrian crashes are in the top 3 or 4 or 5. But it's not very common to see those bicycle and pedestrian crashes being number 2 when you look at a citywide area. We've mapped the fatal and injury crashes in the town, and you can see those points on the left are the vehicle crashes. On the right, those are the bicycle and pedestrian crashes. You'll notice there's a lot fewer bicycle and pedestrian crashes than the vehicle crashes, but they tend to be so much more severe when a pedestrian or cyclist is hit and killed or hit. That's why they end up being such a outsized issue in this community. So you can see some of those trending areas, kind of mostly surrounding downtown, especially towards the south, close to Wallace Park, southwest, and then again along Baptiste, along Old Casey Road, Silver Street, some of those major streets. This again shows a little bit wider perspective, not just the core downtown area, but you can see that there are some hot spots when you look on 169, but for the most part, the highest crash areas are in the downtown area and in the business area along Baptiste. Just a few things that we looked at in terms of contributing circumstances. A lot of time we might think that weather has a big impact or day or night, but 87% of the crashes happened in dry weather, 84% happened during the day or street lights were on. So we looked at other factors. 41% of these fatal and serious injury crashes happened because of distracted drivers. So more than a third were a result of someone driving distracted, looking at their phone or whatever else. Intoxication is usually something we talk about a lot, but only 7% of the crashes involved intoxicated drivers. So you can see from that distracted driving is a lot more dangerous than drunk driving. We don't want people doing either one of them, but we can see what's really important or what's more important here. About a little less than 40% or so happened at driveways, intersections, but when you look at bicycle and pedestrians, almost 80% happened at those intersections or driveways. So that can start to help us mold any kind of recommendations we do for safety, looking at those locations. We also are working right now on a statewide active transportation plan for the Kansas Department of Transportation and doing systemic analysis, which helps us to predict where crashes are more likely to happen. Crashes are relatively rare and they're inherently somewhat random. So we look at big data sets, we can actually see and predict where crashes are likely to happen in the future, even if they haven't happened yet. And a city the size of Paola, the highest crash locations are 4-lane roads, undivided roads, roads with a little bit higher vehicle volumes, 5,000 plus vehicles, and at 25 to 35 mile per hour speed. And when you look at which streets in the city those are, that's Baptiste, that's Silver Street, North Pearl, Old Casey Road. And I think what's really important to think about here is that we can see these are those two corridors were the highest traveled for cyclists and for pedestrians. They're also the highest crash corridors. They're also the corridors that are directly adjacent to the schools, and on the south end access parks and people have to cross to access the lake. So very important streets to look at the safety on.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Jay or Jared? Jared did forget to mention that we did find out that the taxi service was really high rated. I'm not sure who runs it, but I've heard really good things about it.
After I tell you, I tell people to stay home, it's too hot.
All right. Well, before we run out of time, we wanted to, unless there's any questions at all, I didn't want to cut everybody off. Okay. before we run out of time, and I'll stick around at the end if somebody has anything they want to ask me about, but Jared too. We wanted to ask this group of leaders some things to help us guide us as we're reaching out to your community, your general public, as well as we're building kind of the focus areas of the comprehensive plan. So first, kind of on the happy, positive side, you know, what do you think Paola's biggest advantages are? You know, what makes us great? What's those big positive things that we can build upon?
We have a hospital.
We have the hospital. Yeah.
It's a safe place to live.
And I think the access to the highway, because I can roll length of Mad in 23 minutes. 18 one. It's kind of not normal.
And to expand on that, the highway, access to the highway, and frankly, then access to the metro.
Oh, yeah, it is. You get out there in the morning, the traffic commuting up there, and it moves. Steve can tell you that when he used to have to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Others?
I think our downtown and the downtown activities is a big deal.
And I think our school district, we have a very high-rated school district. They do a good job. We have a grocery store.
I missed that.
We're a self-sustaining community.
Yeah, we have a grocery store.
Yeah, we'll say-
Oh, was that what you said? The grocery store. It's all self-sustaining. Actually, you guys don't, I mean, it's how you want to define a small town. I don't feel like you guys are a small town because some of your retail mix it's, you know, you don't have to go far. It's all right here, so.
Do you know what makes it unique is the way it's laid out? And it makes you feel like it's a larger community than what it actually is when you hear what the population is. People will ask me about the population and I tell them, and they think that it's much larger than that, and it's because the way the city is laid out with Baptiste and your downtown and your old Casey Road, and it gives a larger feel than what it actually is.
Right, we've got shops and amenities like a larger city, but we've got a small town feel.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all
That's
a
it
small
exactly.
footprint though.
Yeah. And I think maybe you missed one of our parks.
Oh, and we may have, so when we send this out, if you think we've missed something, what
Well,
message us
It's
back?
the one out there, it's the one that's an acre right by the hospital.
Okay.
When we annexed that, they gave an acre of that to the city for a park, and it's right there by the hospital, and I think you missed that one.
Well, that's because I missed that, because I didn't know we owned that.
You didn't know we owned
No, because I went to our website to look at all of our parks and I didn't see that on there.
That's an historical site.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
I can never be classified as a park.
We do have. There's benches out there. So it is a park, and I don't know that it actually, it has a name, but I know Floyd worked quite a while with
Yeah.
people that owned all of that property to get them to give an acre of that land.
I already started another sheet, so you have to come up with more. So, I don't want to waste paper, but again, those big advantages.
It's a very attractive community.
Yeah. This guy would say so, coming into town, it's very nice up there. I'm gonna add clean, can I add clean?
Yes,
And our park square really adds a lot.
and you know, that's another thing, people in the car with me that's from out of town always comment about how clean the town looks. And you know what I credit that with is our code where we don't allow flags and signs all over town.
Oh, no.
And you laugh, but it makes a difference. You go into Olathe, Lord, you can't hardly see the streets with the signs, and you're thinking, where in the world am I with all these signs?
We'll have to drill into that first, recommendation, I feel we're in trouble on that one.
Oh, okay.
Others, I feel like I missed one, there was a side comment when I was writing down that track to clean town. What else?
I think it's a safe community.
Yeah, safe.
Oh, we got churches. Is that what you're saying?
Churches and police officers.
Safe.
The churches and police officers.
Churches and police. Soul and safety.
Combination.
There we have soul and safety.
Okay.
I'm a little partial to our city employees. I know we have good employees that work at the city that help a lot of that happen.
And our public buildings, we have put a lot of money into our public facilities.
We have a lot of unique businesses. We have Reliance Labels, we have Splash Tackler.
Yeah, we have Reliance and Splash Tackler.
We have
That's
Ford,
correct.
which is extremely unique. We got a lot of unique attractive businesses.
And you know, I don't know if this says a lot or not, but we have a strong mental health area here at our Elizabeth Layton Center, and we have 2 of those facilities, and that's important too. Yeah, Lake Mary draws from everywhere, their employees, and they have their residents, some of them are from around the world.
As a relative newcomer to the community, I found it a very welcoming community. Felt very much at home here right away.
Good. That's what the little man on Wheel Street told me. I saw him when he was up at the hospital in Olathe, and I visited with him, and he bought that house. He moved up from the city, went to Florida, came here and had breakfast, and thought he liked the town, went and bought the house. He's the one that has a greenhouse that gives away the tomatoes. They're on Maple, and he's not really like it here, so he bought a house after he went to breakfast at the Circle. Isn't that interesting? Nice
Okay.
man.
Any others? Before I change the paper.
Restaurants.
Restaurants.
Oh, we got restaurants. That we do.
I'm gonna be a little more specific and say, I bet it's the sit-down, restaurants, not the fast food. The fast foods are great. I like Sonic, does it show? But I like Sonic, but yeah, the sit-down restaurants are great.
We have a new daylight donut, that thing, you can't get in there every morning. It about has a street block somewhere, he's just trying to get up the street.
We have a nice golf course.
I bet you thought this nice. They do have a good golf course.
Okay. Well, next we're gonna jump, and we can sure add more to this list. I wanna jump to, what are those most challenging aspects for us, especially as we're thinking through this plan. What are those challenging aspects of our community?
Quality, high-speed internet.
Hey, you're waiting for that one.
That's
You can underline that with exclamation.
We're working on it, that's the top of our agenda.
What?
That's the top of our agenda, we're working on it.
Okay.
You're welcome.
So, I've definitely heard it from outside the city, but in the city,
Yes,
residential and for business use.
everything.
Okay, yep.
Especially when you look at your trends that you were showing, more people working in, you will not grow without internet.
Yeah. Others?
Housing is something that's always, I hear people want to live here. And I think your numbers when it comes to the rent are some of them a little low. But you would have to have taken in the ones where they get income-based rent,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know?
Yep. There's the tax credit or the subsidized.
Yeah, and that would have been
Voucher.
included, but to rent like a 2-bedroom house, if you can find one, I'm pretty sure is higher than that. And I think the properties are, I told Sid, I saw on the west side, where we've got 3 with dumpsters now, that they've bought the houses and they're getting them out. That's just been within the last few weeks. So people are buying the older homes and they are redoing them.
And I think, Charles, that is a positive trend, because you've got this good core housing stock, some of it needs some love. We saw that heat map that Danny kind of put together. And then that's maybe another generation of, say, first-time buyer or, you know, or sometimes it's our more affordable housing stock, but it needs more work. It's a lot more effort. And then if it's not for sale, well, then it's just not there on the market. How about the new stuff? You know, what are you guys, are you hearing that that's a big issue? It's hard to find a house to buy. You want to move in here,
Yes,
you
it
want
is.
something new.
We approved Hidden Meadows final plat last night. That's a good thing.
How many lots was that?
How many-
19 lots? What were the lot size and what width, their general?
Oh. 55, at least 55 by 127, probably lower.
Okay,
That's our standard.
I mean, they're a good sized lot. They're not.
they're not like acreage lot or half.
No.
And that was connected to another, what, 19 that were
Over in
Already.
Hidden Hills.
already been platted, but that are set to be developed.
Right, it's almost 40.
So you got lots coming on, but it's hard to find a home to buy.
Well, in the housing availability, I think whenever you were doing the ages of residents, I think some of it is tied to school age kids not being here. Because first time home buyers can't find anything.
Right. I know we have our police officers, and so
We
our
lack a-
teachers are all have to
Right.
live in Johnson County. They can't find a place to live there.
Places where they
Right.
And we're kind of jumping ahead to the next one, basically this one, because right now, one of the biggest things about internet housing, and I have a whole question on housing, but let's keep running.
I'll say some of our aging infrastructure. Some of our infrastructure is pretty old. Very old.
But you know, we're doing better about
We are.
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
About getting it up and when we started doing the lining.
Sewage.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we do so much of that every year. That's been very helpful. Who is this?
Other issues, ignore my hand right.
Trade school and or community college.
Yeah, we don't have any secondary, or post-secondary yet.
Okay,
We got Fort Scott Community.
Well,
Yeah.
it's it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. We have it, but it's not great.
They're not.
what is the kind of the curriculums at the community college? Do you guys know? So it's not trades.
They do.
They have a little
have-
bit. They have a little bit.
Yeah, they have an HVAC program somewhere where they send our kids down to Garnett.
That's the auto mechanic.
No,
HVAC
HVAC,
too. Okay.
because I took a kid to school early this year that had to get there to catch a bus to go down there.
Something that's interesting about Paola is that we are in Fort Scott Community College's service area. Whenever Johnson County is, 30 minutes north to us, Fort Scott is an hour south. And so it seems more convenient to go to Johnson County Community College, which actually has a much larger,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
they do.
they don't have, I don't know who chooses that, it's the state that chooses that, but I think if Paola had their choice, we would rather be an extension of Johnson County than
Versus
Fort
Fort
Scott
Scott.
Community College, yeah.
That's probably true. I heard that at one meeting I was at,
Or even, yeah.
the one we went to there. K-State. Oh, yeah, with that lady from the county.
Other disadvantages, those kind of issues.
We don't have any more minuses.
That's okay. We can just be one sheet.
I ride a bike a lot, and this is not a bicycle friendly community.
Okay.
It's dangerous.
Our streets are narrow. We have
They're
old
narrow.
narrow streets.
Yeah.
They're not hardly wide enough for two cars.
Yeah.
If somebody parks on one, you've got a one-lane street. And I see what you're saying with the
Yeah.
bicycles.
I mean, and people don't pull over.
You're right
I
there.
thought about carrying a magic marker with me, and if I did it, I'd have a stripe down my car.
Okay, important safety tip. I haven't heard of that. That's not a bad idea. You ink your hand, so at least they have a big handprint.
Yeah.
For the forensics.
But you are right. That's,
And I wonder if that ties back to even what kind of the traffic crash fatality information that Jay was sharing and how the pet bike number is very high, so, okay.
It also-
Others?
Yeah, it also shows why there's such a hot spot at Lake Myola. That's because it's a safe place to go ride your bike.
Right. But only as long as you're on the trail.
Trail, yeah.
Yeah.
Getting there's another issue.
Well, I mean, even if you ride around on the road around the lake, which I don't ride the trail on my bike, I walk it but not ride it. And ride the street around there, that's a narrow street when you get traffic coming through.
You're right, it is. And I know in our older sections of town,
Yeah.
our streets are narrow. You're right.
Anything else?
Oh, did we mention high-speed quality internet?
We have to put that first on our list, I can tell.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's a big issue.
I mean, I wrote that down as soon as I saw this graph. Was like, more people working from home, we need that internet. We don't have.
The modern day indoor plumbing.
Sid loves that too.
Indoor plumbing, no.
Yeah.
Indoor plumbing, yeah.
So in my neighborhood, they're literally in front of my house, running down my street, new tubes for fiber. And none of us are complaining about the disruption and the mess and chewing up our lawns. We're like, yes, no, I'll take care of it. That's okay that you're parked in my driveway. I'm fine. So I'm with you there. Okay, anything else before we go on? We touched on it, but is there anything more you want to talk about housing? So housing issues and opportunities. Very fairly, you talked about availability and I think cost, especially our renters are cost burdened. And I think even if there was more owner-occupied opportunities, our renters wouldn't be as cost burdened. But that is going to be an affordability issue.
Chris, I think you heard a comment back here too that you might have missed about diversity, lack of diversity in housing type.
Is there a certain housing type you think we really would be supported and needed in the community?
I think townhomes and duplexes.
I do too. That's just what I started to say.
You know, that first home for, new families or retirees.
You know those right up there by Spring Hill going up the highway?
You go to a lot of other communities, like you go to Lewisburg, you go to Spring Hill, they've got.
I know we have teachers of them that are moving up there.
Yeah, we
I
have
mean,
teachers that live there.
they teach here, but they have to live up there. They can't find anything in town.
And the good thing about I think townhomes is they could meet needs for young professionals or people that are seniors that don't want to take care of their, yards and stuff anymore.
We're transitioning out of a single family home into a townhome, which then frees up stock of your
Right.
single family.
That's why your senior apartments fill up so fast, but that will free up
We've
homes.
really made some good gains in senior housing
Yes.
in the last 10 years.
Yes, we have. We've done
But they
well.
filled up quick.
Yeah, they always have a long list for those.
Right now, a housing issue is just the cost to build. That's just, it's not. the only
That's
issue.
lumber truck
Yeah.
driven
Not-
now. That's market driven. That's not. Convert.
Maybe helping them, like, who was saying on the west side, somebody was buying some of the older homes. Maybe that's making people buy an existing house and fixing it up instead of building right now because homes are so expensive. But that's quite a short term.
When they're taking these houses and doing that, they're really dropping up the cost of
Yeah.
what that house is. Due to the
Oh, I know.
cost of what it's taking to improve
Some
those
of the
homes.
ones by us.
Yeah. Yeah. Price of two.
How about the apartment question? If we suggested, hey, there's areas in town which would be good for new apartment development, is that going to be kind of a dirty word in town? Is there going to be
Around
a
our
position?
square. It depends on where you.
Yeah, I think it depends, and what type of apartments.
You know, you're right, Leanne, the buildings around the square, people would like to live upstairs, but the cost of getting the life safety, you know, with a fire is kind of a drawback on those too. But I think the hotel down there stays full all the time.
So you were just talking about downtown upper story apartments?
Yeah.
Yeah, people would like to live down there, but we don't have much available down there. And several of the businesses don't want people living above them either. They just don't want somebody walking around up there.
Sure. Okay, because I want to get you out of here in an hour and a half. Instead of 3 hours, I jumped over.
Oh.
It's not 3 hours. Let's, we can come back to this, but I hit the next one for you. On the transportation side, we talked about biking, but not being bikeable, but are there any other transportation issues you want your consultant team to be thinking about?
You know, transportation in rural America is an issue.
Transportation in rural America? More into that, what do you mean?
Well, when I get done at 5, and sometimes I'm still out working at 8 or 9, because people are at the hospital, or the hospital calls and needs something done, and things like this. And I have people that need to like get on, we do have the limo service, and I do refer people on to them if they're going clear to the airport. But I can only go like up to, I could roll 159th in there in Olathe and get back all right, and they can make a connection there with the 1010 or Uber or something. But trying to get from here to there is an issue.
Yeah.
And they can't, and like I say, I can only work, I work 70 hours a week or more now, and that's all I can do. I mean, I don't want to ride with myself after that. So.
Well, especially if you got the windows down.
Yeah,
Especially with the air conditioning.
Saturday night, had three old people out at 10 o'clock at night, none of us should have been, but anyway, we was. But it is an issue, and they have, the senior center does well. They have, Osawatomie has those in Lewisburg and Paola. Now, if you have to go into the city for a doctor's appointment, Paola would do that, but I'm not sure they will now, because I had a lady call and tell me that they would take him from here to hit the Lewisburg senior transportation to take her on to her appointment. She didn't want to do that. It was like downtown. It was a dental college, wherever it was. So we do have good transportation, but they get done, they quit taking calls at 2:30, and I think they start at 8.
Sure.
Well, that doesn't really work for everyone.
Right.
And so it is, and you don't have another taxi from here to, I think maybe Pittsburgh. I don't even know if Fort Scott does, Ottawa doesn't.
Yeah.
And you have to get on up to Olathe, and Olathe will bring you down, but they won't come down here and pick you up. So it's an issue. You either have to have a car, you have to have a ride, or you have to have something. I take people on a regular basis from Olathe or from Osawatomie over here, some up to work and appointments and just to shop sometimes.
And that's going to be a tough one for us to wrestle with, but I think that's important for us to have on the list.
Yeah, but I don't know either, because you can't.
You're going to have to hire some employees. That's the only thing. But even then, your cost, I mean, your cost is your cost. That can also be a burden to ridership.
Well, you know what, and I deal with a lot of people on fixed income, and that's why my prices are the same for the last 20 years. I'm retired, so it's okay, but it is an issue because they don't always have the funds, and they'll have people in town just come at Christmas and give me money and say, use this for people that need it. And I do, I write it down, and when I have someone that don't have the money, I keep track.
Sure.
That's what I did with her money when she brought it to me.
I'm glad you're doing that.
So.
Are there other transportation issues? So we know, we call it, transit, that type of service is a big issue, and it's a big issue in other communities.
It's a national issue.
Yeah.
Is it really?
It is. It's frankly, it's an issue even in my town.
Well, you know, I had a lady one time moved up to Johnson County there in Overland Park. She told me she's better off down here riding with me. She went into a home up there because she couldn't get a taxi in Johnson County. And she came down here, made her appointments and did all of her things and then.
And it also, I don't want to say the convenience factor, but even when we have bus service, sometimes it's not very convenient. It can take you a long time to get to where you need to go with lots of transfers, which can be very confusing, especially if you're a periodic rider. You're not doing it every single day.
And senior citizens sometimes when they have walkers and all those types of things, and they just need a little assistance sometimes.
At one point in time, we did have Johnson County bus service did come down to Paola.
They'd pick up at Walmart and take them into
Yeah,
Johnson
they didn't do that
County.
anymore.
They'd stop at Spring Hill. That was a good service. I'd recommend that to people. And then they just couldn't make it.
You know what year that ended?
I'm gonna say just like 3 years ago.
Oh, no, it's been a lot longer than that. Mhm.
But one of the problems with that was it ran down to Johnson County Courthouse and it terminated there. So like I worked in the city,
Uh-huh.
but I had no way to get from there to my office.
Yeah.
And they didn't have another bus you could transfer to at that time. You know, they have increased their bus service up there now. I do know that, and they do have a few more options, but they're not always cheap options either.
We don't even have like a park and ride where we could go, drive to Spring Hill and park and then get onto
Yeah.
a bus or something
No,
like
there's
that.
not. And
One
Spring Hill
issue-
doesn't have anybody either, because I
Yeah.
take people there.
One thing that I think that the city found out the hard way was about our sidewalk. And we have a lot more pedestrian and bike traffic now than we did, say, 10 years ago because of the school district used to provide transportation. And then they, due to budget cuts, cut transportation. So now all of a sudden, one year we had buses dropping kids off. The next year, we got kids biking and walking. And then they were like, hey, we don't have, I don't have a sidewalk from my house to here. We're like, well, that wasn't a problem a year ago. Now all of a sudden it is. So it's,
It was funding.
yeah.
They,
And the majority of those kids have to cross the hospital Baptiste Drive intersection.
A lot of those
that
roads
four-way
that were-
stop out there, though, thank heavens, has really helped. And we do have a sidewalk all the way now, down to there. And people are very good and we got lights where the walk lights there. And so you use Baptiste, yeah. But when it's really cold, it's still.
Did I hear also in that comment about sidewalk condition or quality?
A little bit. Yes, like we have some sidewalks that are not as good as others. There's 50/50, sidewalk share where the city pays for half of it and a lot of people take advantage of it. But there are gaps in our sidewalks. You might walk down a perfect sidewalk one block and then the next block there's not one. And then there's another one.
So it's really more the sidewalk gaps, the missing segments, isn't there?
And supposedly every sidewalks are brick and
Yeah.
some people clean their brick and some won't.
Is that a code enforcement issue?
I think it's the individual citizens.
So there's not a code that
I think there's an ordinance that says there has to be a sidewalk on one side of the street.
No.
I think so.
Oh, there is?
There is now for new development,
Well,
but
no,
there wasn't for prior development, but there is now for any new development.
There's no sidewalks in Country Club.
Yeah, and that's a good
Yeah.
You don't have storm
Or
drains
Osage.
either, stormwater runoff either. That was before that was put in, it was built before all that got in there.
How about accessibility of sidewalks? And sometimes it's things we kind of look at in a community, it's a hard one to tackle. But it's having the kind of the more modern ramp section with those, what do we call it, truncated domes with the detectable devices, so somebody has a cane or a little lesser visibility, they know that they're on a ramp or entering a ramp area or crosswalk area, I should say. Is that a concern that you guys have heard or an issue? Okay.
We probably are. Look good. I mean, some of the ones that I was just looking at one today that I don't think would technically be a adequate ramp, but it has a ramp. It has a truncated dome to it too. But I think it could have been built to the standard at the time.
Yeah.
But now, if you were looking at it, it's not, it doesn't meet the standard.
You know, we are getting more people too that have those chairs, you know, the motorized chairs and scooters where they take them to the store, Price Chopper and Walmart. I see them doing
That
that.
scares me to death with them on the highways.
Yeah.
And the
Well, they get up on the sidewalk, Chad, is good. Well, yeah, there's a lady out there at Senior.
Right on East Street.
All right, I'm gonna jump to our last one, it's about economic development. And what are those economic development issues? and
You're out of
opportunities?
paper.
Pardon me?
You're out of paper.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm ready.
Oh, you're prepared.
I use enough of these, I love doing this, so it's all good. The question is, how fast can I change it out? But be thinking, what are those opportunities, as you guys see it, for economic development, which could be whatever you're thinking. So business development, industrial, retail, workforce.
I think an economic development issue is the lack of secondary training opportunities. Also, I think the lack of 68 highway expansion.
I think that's gonna be a ways in coming. They
Yeah,
didn't
but
require that
it's
right
one of
away.
those- It's
You
one of those
know,
things that
when they
would
did
happen
that.
on time. I'm curious to know what the ripple effect would have been.
Yeah,
If it was done back in 2015, how different Paola might be because of it.
they just didn't
You're talking
require that.
68 highway.
Yeah.
You know, that's how we got 169. I know we went to Topeka different times to lobby for it, but they had the right way acquired. And that made all the difference in the world.
Having done some coaching and consulting with small businesses, I think that there's a real opportunity for small business growth.
169.
If there was the resources behind it to really pull that in and kind of make it a community priority for growth in that direction.
So really kind of beyond thinking just a business incubator, but really nurturing small business.
Yes, I mean, start creating that environment that is supportive to small business growth. I think there's a real opportunity here for them.
And I heard from actually two stakeholders, kind of with the comment about it being a welcoming community, that it's a very much everybody watches out for each other, is always willing to help out. The folks who want to go in there. So I can see that being a big thing, to help that entrepreneurial spirit. No, I should have talked about, I was writing that down, business growth, creating a
culture.
A supportive culture, nurturing culture.
Yeah.
You know, people in town are supportive of the businesses because when people wasn't going out to eat, they was very supportive of the restaurants and the carry out. And some of our restaurants did very well. And the community really supported them.
I think one thing that hurts our uptown businesses is a lot of them are owned by one or two individuals, and their rent is way too high for our district.
We don't have a lot of owner occupied businesses in a sense.
You know, I think that's an opportunity, because if we can solve the second level living, that can help potentially help supplement that rent, so that the resident can help drive the rent down on the downside.
But if the person that owns those buildings isn't willing to cooperate with those patrons.
Yeah, right, ultimately it comes down to that, but they could, I mean, I've seen that work, where if the owner really wants to make sure that the businesses are downtown, they get living upstairs and they say, that's gonna pay for the building, I just need a little bit of rent.
But if those businesses can be purchased, those buildings.
Those buildings, the property.
I think that's your biggest block is the ownership issue. You've got several good businesses that have come in, got established, rent has increased, the business goes out of business and it's vacant. And that's happened several times, just since I've been.
Sure.
One of our biggest businesses on the square would like to buy their building, but the owner wants 3 times the appraised value.
Yeah.
And no bank's gonna loan that.
Sure. Oh, that's a good point. Are there any other type of business? I love this idea about the small business culture to incubate it. You know, so much, we always think about the once in a lifetime wins. If we just, you know, brought in this big industry, yay, what a win. And those are great. But so much of our economy locally is built, it's the small businesses. They're kind of the biggest chunk.
The whale hunting doesn't always work out.
Pardon me?
Yeah, whale hunting doesn't always work out.
And it's always a miracle when they happen, and they always come at a big price because you gotta really give them some free money, some incentives.
Well, and your small businesses are gonna be the ones that feed into all those positives that we talked about earlier. You know, their kids are in school here, they participate in activities, so keeping them plugged in is important.
I don't know if you may have said it or not, but we lack quality, high-speed internet.
So is that an issue? That's the first one.
Is that on the list?
Huge issue.
That and housing. are both-
Wait, I thought it was high-speed quality.
Anybody you want.
I was still stuck on air-conditioned cabs.
She doesn't even have a computer.
Yeah, send her an email.
Yeah, try.
I'll email her.
I did get some more emails from you.
Yeah, who does?
I got some from you.
Oh, yeah, every now and then, I used to do that, and I just figured out, you know, I really don't have time for this, I'm in the car all day, who cares? They go to Randy.
I think the internet thing is still a big issue, internet service, because for what a business needs is even different than, you know, a house with, you know, 3 kids and, yeah, everybody at home. Well, that was my house.
Yeah.
I had to upgrade my DSL for 2 phone lines coming in. It's stupid expensive. I can't wait to get rid of it. So. Other opportunities like, hey, you know what? We're really main and main for this type of thing. Gosh, why hasn't somebody ever done this? I know that was a reach question. Yeah. Well, I think if you spend a lot of time focusing on, maybe a little bit on the internet service, but the small business growth, the quality of life stuff and the housing, some of this other stuff just falls in place. Kind of like you can't force a grocery store to show up anywhere, they count rooftops first. Luckily, you have just enough rooftops for the price chopper, so that's good.
We both have a huge area.
Yeah. Actually, is that the only one? Is there one more grocery store in town?
Walmart.
Well, Walmart, there you go. Yep. I was just thinking you really are at the stage where you have 2, but Walmart with what they sell now is really kind of that second one. Okay.
Dollar General.
Dollar General's that's
Yeah.
Business.
Dollar General saves a lot of little towns.
Yeah. Well,
Yes,
and
it
then,
does.
and I forget the name of it, but basically the farm and fleet building, the supply, yeah. Yeah. So Thielens and all those types of businesses are good. Okay. Well, we're 10 minutes past our time. I'm so sorry. Any other thoughts or questions for us that we haven't talked about that you want to make sure we're thinking about as we're talking with your community and drafting the big plan ideas?
I heard it mentioned several times, but I don't know that she got it written down, is the width of our streets.
Sure.
Our streets are,
They're not going.
they ain't gonna get
That's
it.
not gonna change.
They're already too wide or too narrow.
They're too narrow.
You know,
Is it the local little residential streets or that next level up?
Well, we have a couple different main thoroughfares that run through town that are narrow. I mean, if you can park on the streets and somebody's gonna have to stop to let oncoming traffic get around. And that's on major cross-town streets.
We've got way too much on-street parking.
Yeah.
Do you know people with the older homes, they don't have enough space in their driveway and they got more cars. Everybody's got a car now, and you take
Well, and
3 or 4 cars in the place in the driveway for 2, it doesn't work real well.
some people aren't even using their garage.
I was gonna say, if they clean the garage out, they can park the cars.
Well, they live in them, so they store in them, but, you know,
You're right, Artie, when the town was first built and it's been built over the years, you started with 1 car garage and 1
because you had
car.
1 car.
And now you've got 3 car garages and 5 cars.
That's right.
And they just getting, I mean, I remember when they started building 2 car garages, and when people proposed to build 3 car garages, everybody said that'll never happen. And now you gotta have 2.5 at the minimum.
You know, you
3 car most of the time, and then you still don't have enough garages.
Well, and we have a lot of truck traffic, and the trucks nowadays used to be single cab.
Yeah.
Now they're club cab, mega club, and
They
extended
park on the
beds.
square, and that takes up half the street, just parking on the square in front of a business. And they'll do
Turns our
houses.
square to a one-way street.
Their houses are so big, I said, there's a garage with a house attached, is what I call them.
Anything else? Good point. Sorry to mess that up. All right, so what's next? So we're just getting into this. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about our website. So Abby, I think is going to take this part over here.
Marshall, how do we want to go about, do you want me to hop off or do you want to pull up the website?
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you.
While they're doing that, what we've got for the public process is we're gonna have a big public meeting. We're looking at June 29th and doing some advertising for it. But not everybody's gonna wanna come to a meeting and participate. So we also wanna direct the community to an online engagement website. So Abby's gonna run through that as they kind of switch things around. And so after this meeting, we'll make sure we'll send everybody a link so you can kind of test drive it, see what you think about it, and then let us know if you have any issues or things you want to change. The staff will do the same thing. And then we'll make that go live for the public, and we'll start advertising that as a part of our public input meeting. And so it's kind of a lot of fun. So whenever you guys are ready, jump right into that.
Can you all see the website?
Yes.
Perfect.
All right. So as Chris has mentioned, we've really created this as an additional platform to reach the audience that isn't able to attend in person and still wants to partake in acting in the comprehensive plan. So this also serves 2 purposes. It acts as the main source of information on plans, engagement, and event information, and keeps everybody up to date on what's new and what's happening with the comprehensive plan. It also is going to act as an engagement platform. So later on, you'll see some of the opportunities residents have to give us their feedback and comments to tell us what they would like to see for Paola in 2050. So as you enter the website, you'll see this logo that we've created for the comprehensive plan, as well as instructions on how to use the site, learn more about comprehensive planning, view past presentation materials and recordings, and project schedules and engagement opportunities. The video that you see on your right is just there for filler to kind of explain what we would like to place there once we get approval. Really just gives you a guide on how to use the site and what to expect when you're using it. To make sure that we catch everybody's attention, to invite them to make their voice heard, we got this big blue banner here for you to view the engagement schedules, as well as really gather all the information you'd need to attend the public workshops or to carry on and partake in the public engagement that we have below this. So following this little portion here, you'll start to see our 6 little boxes that are the public engagement actions and opportunities. So this visioning postcard, when you click on the write a postcard link, brings up this little postcard that people who will attend will physically get handed to them, as well as people that view our website are able to scroll down and then write a comment saying what they, or come and visit me in Paola and Planning 2050. And then they have the opportunity to leave their email for further comments, and then anybody that clicks it is able to see the additional comments made there. The next one is a 20-question survey that we have of varying question types. So multiple choices, ranking high and low, what if you agree and disagree, a few kind of ranking your preferences, as well as a few general demographic questions at the end. In image voting, they are able to then click into 6 different categories and rank their 4 most favorite photos. When you click into one of them, you're able to see that they only have 4 votes to cast. And so whenever they reach that limit, they either have to accept the ones that they've voted on, or they can reallocate those based on their changing minds and whichever ones they truly prefer. And then different just kind of categories to vote on. So we have the parks and recreation, downtown Paola, streets, low density residential with different typologies and visual representations of what this could look like, as well as multifamily residential and what that could look like. And finally, streetscapes.
So maybe we should add really narrow streets and really wide streets and just see how.
There we go. In the map your ideas example, you're welcomed with this prompt of instructions. We have these 6 markers currently chosen, but we are looking for your feedback and input if you have any other ideas that you feel would be best. So we have favorite place, idea, housing opportunity, more of this, less of this, and a pedestrian issue area. So once you click the Get Started Now button, you're actually able to then zoom in on the map of Paola, and then you can drag and drop any of the ideas or favorite place opportunities that you'd like to throw in there. So then you can insert a comment and say, I think we should insert more parks around park benches around Park Square. Then you'll enter your name, your zip code, and have the opportunity to insert your email as well for further comment. So once that's in there, you'll see an example of one down below, and you can click in it and you're seeing other people's comments, and you can like or dislike and just really interact with everybody and their ideas that they have going. In the activity portion on the far left panel, you're actually able to see all of the activity that's going on the map, so you aren't going to miss anything, and you can stay current with all of everybody's ideas. And then in priority ranking, we really give it to the citizens to tell us what they would like to allocate funding to. So we know we can't pay for everything, but if they had their 3 votes, where would they vote it? Well, where would they cast them to? And again, once they meet those 3 votes, they either accept where they voted, or they can reallocate those based on different preferences. And for general comments and feedback, really just anything that they'd like us to know that they don't feel like we touched on, and we everybody can continue to see their comments there and build on different ideas. And then when you scroll back up to the very top, you have additional resources and links. So the homepage just brings you back to the central page. The City of Paola homepage gives you all of those resources that the City of Paola provides. And then in the About the Plan link, it takes you to anything that discusses like what comprehensive planning is, because we recognize that not everybody might not know what's included in a comprehensive plan, why we have them, their importance, and any of the details that would follow with those. We also have the current comprehensive plan adopted by the City of Paola. Its last adoption was in 2006. And then with the Get Involved link at the top, this is really just a central hub for everybody to come to and catch up on the most up-to-date information. Obviously, this one already needs a little bit of update since it has the June 22nd meeting, which has now been is now switched over to June 29th. But it also includes that hyperlink to direct you like right into the visioning workshops and the different public engagement activities that we've included. And then lastly, we have the planned meetings. So if anybody like tonight who wasn't able to make it, we will always upload these videos and recordings so that they can review what we discussed and then be prepared for any of the upcoming meetings that they are able to attend. And at the very top, we just have a Google Translate opportunity for those that English isn't their first language and would really like to feel comfortable on the website. But that is all we have for you on the website so far, if you have any feedback.
Okay. And so we're we got a little bit of updating and finishing to do, but we'd like to send that out to the committee and this group just for a little bit of feedback and make sure you guys test drive it a little bit before we run it out, send it out to the public at large. it's not like we're locking it down that somebody couldn't get there, but really to have you guys kind of help us make sure it's communicating the right message. But that one-stop shop, that as we continue on through the process, you can send your friends, family, coworkers, interested parties to this site to figure out what's going on, watch a former meeting. But again, all those activities are really going to be replicated in this room. But we do know people also don't want to come to a meeting or are busy and it won't work for them on that night. Okay, so let us conclude here with what's next. So again, we're in the public input phase where we're going to have a public input meeting. We're in the middle of conducting stakeholder meetings, interviews right now. Already had some today, this morning, getting some good information. And then we will come back, meeting with our steering committee, sharing all that good information, and then rolling on right into the next phase of plan drafting. So before we conclude tonight, any questions for me or any one of us on the consultant team? All right, again, we will also follow up with this presentation since there's so much really good information in it. I want to read it at your leisure while you're waiting for your next fair to stop by. Okay. All right, well, thank you everybody for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was like, oh.